In the wide sweep of history, few individuals have resonated across continents and eras as powerfully as the man known simply as Mahatma Gandhi, a frail figure in a simple dhoti, spinning his own cloth in quiet humility, a voice raised not in anger or violence but in truth and steadfast resolve. A leader who inspired millions to stand against oppression, not with rifles and war, but with peaceful resistance, moral conviction, and an unshakable belief in the dignity of every human being. The world watched as he walked peacefully, not toward destruction, but toward freedom and justice. His footsteps echoed across time, shaping movements far beyond the land of his birth. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869, in the coastal town of Porbandar, in the region that is now the Indian state of Gujarat. His father served as a local chief minister to the ruling Prince states, and his mother was a deeply devout woman whose religious life deeply influenced young Mohandas. Raised in a household steeped in Hindu and Jain ethical traditions that emphasized nonviolence, truthfulness, vegetarianism, and compassion for all living beings, the values of his upbringing would form the moral foundation for his later life. At a young age, Mohandas was married, as was the custom, to Kasturba, who would remain his companion through decades of struggle. In 1888, he traveled to London to study law. During his years in England, he came into contact with Western ideas and studied texts that would deepen his spiritual and moral understanding. He qualified as a barrister in 1891. Returning to India, however, he found that he lacked the financial resources and the social support to establish a successful law practice. Disappointed but not defeated, he accepted a legal assignment that took him to South Africa. It was in those early years in South Africa that the seeds of his transformation took root. He confronted racial discrimination, witnessed to the injustice suffered by fellow Indians living under colonial and racist laws. The shock of prejudice and unfair treatment awakened in him a deep sense of moral urgency. The values nurtured in his childhood merged with a new awareness of injustice. In a foreign land far from home, Mohandas Gandhi began to shape the philosophy and methods that would define his life: patience, resilience, self-discipline, moral courage. In South Africa, over more than 2 decades of his life, Gandhi evolved from a young lawyer into a social leader and moral activist. He observed how Indians and people of Indian descent faced systematic discrimination under colonial and racial laws. In the face of such injustice, he could have chosen resentment or bitterness. Instead, he chose a different path. He began to organize the oppressed communities into a unified voice, advocating for rights and dignity. In 1894, he helped found the Natal Indian Congress to fight for the civil and political rights of Indians in South Africa. Faced with discriminatory laws such as forced registration and segregation, Gandhi urged his compatriots to resist, not violently, but through non-cooperation and peaceful civil disobedience. This novel form of protest became known as satyagraha, a commitment to truth and non-violence, a willingness to endure suffering rather than inflict it, a moral stance grounded in conscience rather than in weapons. Over and again, he and his followers faced arrests, abuse, and hardship. Yet their resolve did not waver. Their struggle succeeded in drawing international notice, awakening conscience in those distant from the pain of oppression. During those years, Gandhi not only proved the efficacy of non-violent resistance, but also refined its philosophical and ethical basis. As war raged across continents and many called for conflict, here was a man who argued that true change must come from within, from the transformation of hearts before the transformation of laws. In 1915, after 2 decades of activism, he returned to India, not as a returning lawyer but as a leader shaped by moral struggle, ready to bring his vision to the land where he was born. His return marked a turning point, as the struggle for Indian self-rule entered a new, broad, deeply rooted phase, under the guidance of a man whose commitment to nonviolence and truth challenged not only colonial authority, but also the mindset of his own people. Back in India, Gandhi devoted himself wholeheartedly to the cause of Swaraj, self-rule, not only as political independence, but as empowerment of every individual and community across social, economic, and religious divides. He joined the national movement for independence and soon became its most visible leader. He urged Indians to spin their own cloth, boycott British goods, refuse to attend colonial courts, and resist British rule through non-cooperation. In the early 1920s, through the movement of non-cooperation, he mobilized millions. His call for mass participation reached peasants, laborers, students, intellectuals, transcending caste, class, religion. As British colonial rule tightened its grip, Gandhi's message resonated across communities. In 1930, he led the Salt March, a 240-mile march to the Arabian Sea, together with thousands of followers, to produce salt in protest against a British tax monopoly. This act of civil disobedience shook the British Empire's foundations. Ordinary Indians, many of them previously apolitical, joined in defiance. The Salt March became not only a symbol of resistance, but a practical demonstration of the power of nonviolent mass mobilization. Over the decades, Gandhi led repeated campaigns: non-cooperation, civil disobedience, peaceful protest, always insisting on nonviolence, always urging moral conscience, always striving to unite Hindus, Muslims, and others in a shared struggle for justice. As independence approached, the movement reached its climax. On August 15, 1947, India achieved independence from nearly 2 centuries of British rule. Gandhi's leadership had changed the course of history. The vision he had nurtured, that freedom could be won without bloodshed, that dignity and justice could be pursued without violence, had prevailed. Beyond political independence, Gandhi reshaped the social fabric. He campaigned tirelessly for upliftment of the oppressed castes, for social justice, for religious tolerance and reconciliation. He demanded dignity for all, equality before the law, and humanity beyond divisions. His life and actions offered a new paradigm: moral leadership, not authority; sacrifice, not domination; community, not hierarchy. Gandhi's path was not smooth. Many in his own country, among nationalists, religious communities, political leaders, opposed some of his ideas. The notion of nonviolence in the face of brutal repression was at times criticized as naive or ineffective. Others feared that his ideas of unity across religions would dilute identity or traditions. As the struggle intensified and as tensions grew between communities, especially between Hindu and Muslim populations, Gandhi strove to promote unity. He undertook fasts, appeals, and dialogues to calm violence and tension. At times the violence seemed unstoppable. He accepted personal risk, hunger, even beating, in a quest to hold together a diverse nation. His insistence on consent over coercion, on truth over power, often meant compromise, patience, and the refusal to demand immediate victory. That stance bred impatience among some allies. The pressure from British authorities was relentless. Prisons, beatings, torture, and suppression were constant threats, used against him and his followers. Moreover, as India neared independence, internal conflict over the future of the nation grew. Many urged partition, many feared communal violence. Gandhi advocated for unity, urging Hindus and Muslims to coexist in mutual respect. That position placed him at odds with radicals on both sides. Despite enormous popularity, his position always carried risk. Opponents, both in colonial power and among local political and religious extremists, regarded his moral leadership and reconciliation efforts with suspicion or hostility. After India gained independence, Gandhi did not retire into comfort or seclusion. He remained focused on the social and moral healing of the nation. He worked tirelessly to ease tensions between communities, urging harmony, understanding, and reconstruction of a united society. Yet the violence and resentment sparked by partition and communal strife proved difficult to control. On the evening of January 30, 1948, as he was walking toward a scheduled prayer meeting in the capital city, he was assassinated by a radical extremist. 3 bullets struck him at close range, and he fell, embraced by the grief and shock of thousands around him. The loss was instant. The man who had given voice to peaceful resistance, to moral righteousness, to unity across faiths, was gone. His death reverberated across India and across the world. Mourning, grief, reflection, a collective sense that one of humanity's greatest voices for peace had been silenced. The shock remained, but his ideas endured. Even decades after his death, Gandhi's influence remains profound and global. The philosophy of nonviolence and civil disobedience that he refined has become a core model for civil rights and freedom movements around the world. His life has shown that moral authority and peaceful resistance can disrupt oppressive power structures without resorting to violence. In his homeland, he is revered as the father of the nation. His teachings continue to inspire efforts for social justice, equality, dignity, and human rights. Across religions, cultures, continents, people draw on his example of truth, restraint, compassion, and moral courage. The memory of his life flows through generations, reminding that freedom without justice is incomplete, that power without conscience leads to destruction, that real change springs not from weapons but from conviction. His footsteps remain a guide along the long path toward justice, peace, and human dignity. That was today's GOAT. Do you agree with our pick? Like the video if you do, or drop your GOAT in the comments. Tell us which country should be next, and subscribe for more GOATs of the world.